Hello, and that's going to be probably the last episode of this project. It's going to be another episode of Q&A. Hopefully, it will be the last one. I might going to do another one later on in a few months if I get more questions, more interesting questions. So let's start with this. So the first question is, why use a weekly layout? It's quite confusing. So I use a weekly layout, as you see. I get a lot of complaints, not complaints, but people told me that it's a little bit confusing, especially at first. So this view is the most efficient one, as you would want to see what's coming up. Don't worry about it being don't worry about being confused, as with time you would get used to it. The more you interact with it, the more clear it gets. For this reason, using correct coloring is highly important. As you can see, I use coloring, it makes more sense, it gives you more structure. So use color, use it correctly, and you would get used to it. And if you do want to get into like a deeper things, you can always go in the day, just do a daily. If it's really complicated day, you can just go into the daily thing. But it's easier if you're doing a weekly thing, easier to reschedule between the days. For example, you want to move the work here, it's just easier to just interact with it in a weekly manner and not in a daily thing. Next question. How long should I spend on doing this? Calendaring. How long should I spend on it? So the initial investment is the most time you will invest. When you first setting it up, that will take some time. After that, I would say no longer than 10 minutes a day or hour a week. At certain time or of changes or long-term planning, you might invest 20 to 30 minutes in one session. For example, starting a new quarter, a new semester. Really changing some things in what I do. Sometimes, or you're going for a vacation, you might spend between 10 to 30 minutes scheduling. Depends how much your schedule is packed and how much you want to be on top of it. But it shouldn't be more than 10 minutes a day, just in generally speaking. And if you really do something, definitely maybe 20 to 30 minutes. But it's good practice to do it, and you will learn things out of it. What should I do if I find myself waking up later than intended? So, is it highly recommended to adjust your schedule as soon as you have that chance? Doing so will give you a better sense of how your day will look like. It also show you if the previous schedule can be maintained by moving everything forward or you will have to cancel or otherwise reschedule. So the better it is, the sooner the better. That's the rule of thumb. The sooner you get on top of it, the better. You wake up in the morning, just move things around a little bit. You don't have to be super specific, but move things around, see what's going on. If you have to cancel, reschedule. So the sooner that you do it, the better it is. This project seemed to be problematic privacy-wise. It's a question I also got because especially if it's very specific, people can know a lot about you. So is it a problem privacy-wise? It's a good question. So in terms of privacy, theoretically it could be a problem, especially if you're someone who has a reason to fear. If you're a celebrity or someone that is a higher up. But I don't think it poses a significant risk to our privacy, as no one really cares. You can watch my video, the case against reality. It's in my channel, in which I go through some reasons why we shouldn't care much about privacy. The main point is that it's really hard to derive valuable information from our data, and no one would really invest the time and effort into us in the first place. We're not that important, even if we trying to think that we're not that important. If it's someone close to us that might have access to our phone, maybe. But one way to minimize privacy issues is using bigger blocks, which will hide more detailed timelines. Obviously, if you care much about your privacy, this might not work for you. If you really care about your privacy, you have your you have something you're hiding from someone close to you that might have access to your phone or to your calendar, that might not be the best for you. But I think that generally we don't have much to fear, and even if someone have that access to our data, they don't have much to do with it. So I don't care that much about it. That's my stance on privacy. Next question. If I notice that lunch is taking more time than intended, or I want it to, should I change it? Should I change the repetition? Because I don't want it to continue to be that way in the future. So let me clarify the question. Let's say we are usually paying attention that we're doing lunch longer than we notice that lunch take an hour instead of 45 minutes, for example. You're going past and you're just seeing that it actually takes longer. Should I change it? Because one reason to not changing it is because if you change it to an hour, that's going to be, from now on, that's going to be the norm. And maybe I don't want it to be the norm. That's the question. Very good question. Anyways, that's a great question, as it has it's a precarious situation. Having a pre-scheduled time frame is making us very likely to utilize the whole time. My advice is to first try to lower the time it generally takes. If after a week or two you still see that you can't adjust to the lower time frame, that is an indication that you should make the block bigger. So what I would recommend here, just to summarize this, try to leave it on. Try to keep, let's say it's a lunch for 45 minutes. Try to keep it on 45 minutes. If you notice that it still doesn't happen, let's say you're working out, it still take 2 hours instead of hour and a half. If you see that you cannot maintain hour and a half, or you cannot maintain 45 minutes lunch, it's an indication the time frame has to be changed, and I would recommend changing it. For how long should I keep doing this? Months, years? Answer is, I would say for at least a year or two. At this time of writing this, I've been doing this for about 3 years, and I'm still learning new things every day. Take into consideration that it would take about a year to get used to it and start to be more specific with your time frames. It takes time to adapt to it, but don't let this discourage you. Even a month in a week here and there is better than nothing. I think that around 5 years is a good time frame to have, but I'll see when I get there. Afterwards, I might continue to schedule the future, but gradually or partially stop adjusting the past. I was saying the more you do it, the better. I think about after 1 year, you're really getting it. It's going to be more specific. You're going to have better data. You're going to learn something. But I think after a little while, I will stop changing the past, because after a little while, I wouldn't want to do it. But I think I would still schedule my future, because you don't want to miss things. So I don't think I'm going to stop scheduling my future, but past events, going back and changing what happened, maybe I will gradually decrease. Next question. Does this mean I must obey what I've already scheduled? So it's something that keeps coming up. Not at all. It's maybe recommended to do so, as it can help you have more structured life, but feel free to reschedule your calendar as many times a day you want. Remember, one of the main points is also to learn yourself. So this is a great chance to do so. There are many days I find myself rescheduling over and over, as the day doesn't evolve as intended. But at least I know what's going on and delete what I want. So it's really good to have that practice. Reschedule, it doesn't matter. Just you want to know what's going on. You want to reschedule. You want to know what's going on, who's against who. So you don't have to obey anything. It happens to me countless of time. Sometimes it's better to go by what you scheduled, but you don't have to. And when it happens to me many, many days, that I constantly have to go back and change and tweak things. Next question. What if I have class that starts at 1:20? Should I use 1:15 as a quarter? Because question is because I generally recommend using 15 minutes increments and not 20 or 25, things like that. Which answer is overall, if the event is constantly at the same time frame, at the same time, or if you must be there at a specific time, doctor appointment, for example, I would recommend using the correct timeline. Make sure other events would not be affected as a consequence of such changes in order to comply with a quarters principle. But if the event is not time sensitive for the minute, always try to stick to the quarters principle. So I'm saying if it's something very important, the class is always at 1:20, the doctor appointment is at a specific time, use that time, but usually try to stick to the quarter principle. And let's do one last question. What to do when a combined event splits? So let's say we don't have much combined things here, but let's say this one, I usually do more combined. This is not my calendar. Well, usually I do more combined events. Let's say this. It's a combined event. Let's say it's split up. So the answer is there isn't a clear best solution. You can split it into two events, but that might take some time. Another way is to overlap two events in same time frames, but this might not be as accurate for future uses. One thing that isn't good to do is to keep it as is. At minimum, you should shorten it and reflect half the event. So there is a few things you can do. I tend to just make it 2, so go in, just change it to a half an hour, for example, add another one. Or I'll say at minimum what you should do is at least shorten it to half, and just don't add the other half. You can add 2 events. If you don't want to change the time frames, you can add just, let's say you have 2 events and it took an hour, let's say the shower and dinner, and you can just do that and don't change. It's not good for future references, but this is another thing you can do. Overlap them, which means that one of them was shorter or both of them were shorter. So there is no clear solution, but you can work with it, find the best way that works for you. So that's going to be all for today. It might be the end of this project. As I said, I might gonna add another Q&A video or another video if I would think that is important, but so far it looks like that's the end. Thank you, and we'll talk soon.